So then I joined the office, I joined the VA, and literally there was only 3 people in the office. So it was me and 3 people, 2 technology transfer people and 1 support person. So 1 technology transfer person had the entire one half of the country east of the Mississippi, and the other person had the entire country west of the Mississippi.
Welcome to the Transfer Files, inside the world of federal innovation. This is your insider's look at how federal laboratories bring groundbreaking technologies to market. I'm your host, Andrea Nelson. In every episode, we'll bring you insights and expertise from throughout the world of tech transfer. In the classic business and self-help book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, author Stephen Covey uses a memorable metaphor to describe a leader's role. Imagine everyone in your office is in the jungle and your mission is to make it out. The operational staff are at the front, hacking through the underbrush with machetes, tackling the day-to-day. Their managers are right behind them, sharpening their machetes, helping them train their muscles, helping them do their jobs as effectively and efficiently as possible. Then you have the leaders. It's their job to climb to the top of a tree and make sure the team is going in the right direction. They have to see the big picture, keep the goal in sight, and map the route there. My guest today is Dr. John Kaplan, the director of the Technology Transfer Program at the Department of Veterans Affairs. He is one of these tree-climbing leaders. When he took the helm in 2016, it was his first job in technology transfer. And he jumped right in with both feet, building the program into a thriving, multi-pronged system that's not just growing, but even leading the way on some fronts among federal T2 programs. Dr. Kaplan has gems to share about leadership, building up a struggling program, and much more. And I'm pleased to welcome him to the podcast. Dr. Kaplan, how did you get to your position? What's your background?
So my background is pretty broad. I started out as an electrical engineering major at the Virginia Military Institute under an Air Force ROTC scholarship. The Air Force sent me to get my master's degree, and I went on active duty in the Air Force. Initially, I was a communications or IT officer. I did that for approximately 8 years at the Pentagon, at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, and at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma in a variety of positions, mostly leadership with managing staff, leading staff on technical things, dealing with IT. After Tinker Air Force Base, the Air Force sent me to Air Command and Staff College, which is a leadership school. After that, I went to the Defense Threat Reduction Agency to work on microelectronics, but actually wound up working on critical infrastructure protection, looking at all the infrastructures across the U.S., the power grid, the telecom grid. It was very interesting work. I was a mid-level officer. This was in the 1999-2000 timeframe. 9/11 happened, and the program was taken from me to be given to a more senior officer, because then the spotlight was on infrastructure protection. And I moved to be the commander of a support squadron at Fort Meade, Maryland, where I was leading things like a dining hall, a gym. And basically, I was like a mayor of a small site. And then I rounded out my career at this organization called the Air Force Office of Scientific Research, providing all the support services for that organization, IT, security, facilities, and everything else. Along the way, during my Air Force career, I got a lot of opportunities to go to school at night. So I got my MBA at night. The Air Force has sent me for my master's degree in engineering full-time right after my undergrad. But then I got my MBA at night at Marymount University. Then I wound up getting my PhD in electrical engineering at the University of New Mexico, again, part-time nights. And then I had the opportunity to go to law school nights and got my law degree from George Mason University School of Law in Arlington, Virginia. So that was my military career. After I left the military, I got a unique opportunity to be a law clerk for the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. The Federal Circuit does all patent appeals and all government contracting appeals. So it's a big deal for somebody like me who wanted to be a patent attorney to get the opportunity to do. After I was done with that clerkship, I was going to go to a law firm to practice patent law, but I got a unique opportunity to work for the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, running all of their support, their IT, security, the building, pretty much everything that dealt with support. Did that for a short time, and then a major patent law firm hired me, and I was then doing patent litigation, big time patent litigation infringement for big clients, big clients this is interesting, but the practice was at this place called the International Trade Commission, which does patent infringement cases dealing with imports. So if a company is infringing someone's patent and importing that technology into the United States, and you win, you hold the technology out of the country. So there's big things at stake. Again, big clients. Did that for a while, left there and went to the Department of Justice, where I was leading their research program on communications and other things to help law enforcement. After that, I did that for a few years, and then I actually went to the International Trade Commission as an attorney to work with a judge and do the opinions and decide the cases. And after that, I came to the Department of Veterans Affairs as the director of tech transfer. It's interesting that I never really did tech transfer before I got to the VA. So I had a technical background, I had a legal background, I had a lot of leadership experience, but I had never done tech transfer before.
Right. You had all the pieces, but
Yes.
you hadn't actually put them together yet.
Yes.
So what was it like moving into that position, and what were you working on when you got into that role?
Okay, so that's interesting. So the reason why that position was open was a few years before I joined, in the 2013, 2014 timeframe, the director of the office left the VA and the position was vacant for a while. At the same time, if you remember, there was a cure for hepatitis C, and it turned out that one of the inventors was a VA person, but it was never properly handled by the VA, and it was jointly owned with the university. So long story short, the VA did not get rights in that. They lost rights. And at the same time, the VA hospital was buying the medication that came out of the research and charging the VA a lot of money. On top of that, the VA person that was involved won this big award, and that uncovered the fact that why doesn't the VA own this? And Congress got involved, and there was actually congressional hearings specifically on the VA's tech transfer office. That highlighted the fact that there was no director, and the office was pretty much in shambles. It wasn't being, there was no director, and there actually was only a couple people in the office because a number of people that were there had left because of the no director and things that were happening. So I was brought on basically to fix what was going on. And the interesting thing was I had to interview all the way up to the head of the whole VHA, Veterans Health Administration, which normally wouldn't happen. So then I joined the office, I joined the VA, and literally there was only 3 people in the office. So it was me and 3 people, 2 technology transfer people and 1 support person. So 1 technology transfer person had the entire one half of the country east of the Mississippi, and the other person had the entire country west of the Mississippi. Needless to say, they were overwhelmed and couldn't do anything. Based on my leadership experience, the Air Force, I pretty much had to quickly move to get people in there. So my first thing was to hire people. So I initially hired 3 additional tech transfer specialists within a month or 2 of me joining. So now I went from 2 people to 5. And what I did was I set up regions of the country, 5 regions of the country, and each tech transfer person had a region. Still very overwhelming. And I also hired 4 additional support people. So now I had 5 tech transfer specialists and 5 support people. Started to do work and figure out all the things that needed to be done. In the meantime, as that was going on, because of the congressional issue that had happened, the GAO got involved and they did a review and audit of the office. So now there's a GAO audit going on. And at the same time, Congress continues to ask questions because, interestingly, the past director of the tech transfer office went to work for a congressman as a congressional staffer, and that congressman was on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. So Congress was asking a bunch of questions about the office. We were answering, and we were also answering the GAO questions. And there was also another committee called the National Research Advisory Council that advised the VA on research, also looking into as an answer question. So my first year or so was pretty much, actually, when I think about it, my first 2 years, like the end of 2016, 2017, and 2018, was pretty much trying to manage the office and answer all these inquiries. At that, also, while that was going on, I was assessing how the office was going to move forward. And I kind of set the vision that we needed more regions and we needed other people in the field that reported to the regional tech transfer specialist. And so I put a plan together and I actually convinced the Atlanta VA Medical Center to hire a person in Atlanta to be the first field technology transfer specialist. And they reported to the regional person for the Southeast. That worked out very well, and Atlanta was very happy. That allowed me to convince the VA to hire more field people. And so we just started to hire people. And so that was like 2018. And now today in 2024, there's 8 regions. There's 8 regional tech transfer specialists. And I want to make sure I get the number right. I think there's approximately 20 field technology transfer specialists. So now we have an entire new organization. We have people on the ground at a number of the major medical centers now dealing with the medical center research that's going on. So, for example, I'm trying to think of a good place. At the Tampa VA, we have a field technology transfer specialist, and they take care of all the stuff going on in Florida, and they report to a regional person that handles Florida and other states. So we've kind of built it like that. And we still have plans to hire more field technology transfer specialists to round things out. My ultimate goal is to actually go from 8 regions to 7 and to have 3 field people under each regional person. And we have one person that's going to be coming on board in Ann Arbor, Michigan next month. And then we're planning on hiring 2 new people in fiscal year 25. So that's kind of the personnel growth of the office. At the same time, there was a number of other things going on. We had a consultant that was being paid under a contract to do marketing and help us with marketing and licensing. They weren't really doing too good of a job. I gave them a year to kind of improve. We worked on some things. I wasn't really happy with what they did. So I began to look at other opportunities for how to do that type of marketing and licensing work, and identified this center called TechLink, which is a center under Montana State University, which is known as a partnership intermediary. So I didn't exercise an option for the contractor, and I entered into an agreement with TechLink to help with marketing and licensing. Now, the good thing about TechLink is they're not a contractor. They're a partnership intermediary. It's in legislation. And they had been doing all the tech transfer, marketing and stuff for the entire Department of Defense. So they had years of experience, and the VA was the second department to hire them.
For listeners, a partnership intermediary is a nonprofit that works with government labs under partnership intermediary agreements or contracts for them to help connect the lab with businesses, assist tech licensing and transfer, and market the lab's innovations to industry. TechLink was created in 1996 to help tech companies around Montana partner with NASA research centers. A few years later, the center became the first partnership intermediary for the Department of Defense. Today, TechLink continues to work with DoD while also managing Montana State University's Tech Transfer Office, running a university lab, promoting small business innovation research, and more.
So now we have all the field people, the regional people, and TechLink now moving forward. And so things got a lot better. Kind of the last piece of the puzzle as far as organization goes was when I got there, our patent prosecution work was being done by outside counsel. And because of the acquisition rules, we literally had 12 small law firms that we were trying to manage to do the VA's patent work. And the challenge with that was each one operated differently, each one billed differently, each one had different expertise, and it was unsustainable. So I moved to put a new patent contract in place with one large firm that could handle all our work and had good quality patents. And we did. We awarded a new contract to a national firm that now does all our patent work. One firm, one type of billing, good quality. They're an established, really good firm. And so the patent quality has gone up dramatically. So now that all that's in place, everything's going really good. We're doing stuff. We're doing more education. So we developed an online education course to educate actually the entire VA, but mostly researchers on tech transfer and what to do. And we did an entire outreach program across the VA. And the results of that was when I got there in 2016, we were doing approximately 200 invention disclosures a year. And by 2017, 2018, we were doing 600 or 700 invention disclosure a year. And that's been a pretty steady state between 600 and 700. And that's probably about right. So the amount of work and things coming through the office went up significantly. The other thing that is interesting about the VA is that most of the researchers are duly appointed, meaning they work for the VA and a university. So a lot of the intellectual property is jointly owned. So my staff also deals with the university tech transfer offices. And the VA is unique, is we're the only agency where that's pretty much done across the board. Like most other agencies, you're a government researcher and you just work for the government. So if you develop something, that agency owns it. In our case, we have to do an ownership analysis of each invention disclosure because possibly the researcher only did the research under the university. So we do that, and it's all running very well. The other challenge I found was just the interaction to get the disclosures in and process them was all being done by hand with emails and forms. And again, unsustainable and not a good approach in this time with the internet and everything going on. So we had a knowledge management system as the commercial off-the-shelf product, and it was on the VA network. So I'll give you an example. If a researcher that works for the VA and a university was on the university network, they could not access the system to log anything in, any disclosure, and to do anything because they weren't on the VA network. So we launched a major effort to get this commercial product certified to be put in the commercial cloud so that it could be accessible from anybody with the right credentials. And we got what's called FedRAMP certification, which is a special government certification.
FedRAMP is short for the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program, a government program that makes sure cloud products and services meet strict security standards so that agencies can safely adopt cloud technologies without jeopardizing federal information.
And actually, we were the first federal agency to do that with any type of product. And because of that, other agencies are now using it in the commercial cloud, because once it's FedRAMP certified, it's certified. So the Department of Energy has taken it over. The Army has taken it over, and other agencies are now looking at it because we get called and ask questions. So we start to turn the corner and lead the way in tech transfer. The other thing that was interesting that happened was I started to look across like recognition and how we were doing things to increase the morale of the staff. And I came, of course, we were involved with the FLC, the Federal Lab Consortium, and the awards program and everything, and the calendar, the planner. And I did a little assessment, and turned out the VA had never won any awards. They'd never been on the calendar. So we launched an effort to publish ourselves. And I forget the year. I think it was 2019. We got on in the calendar. We got a VA technology on the calendar for the first time. And we also started to look at submitting awards. And then in 2021, I believe it was, or maybe 2020, we started to put awards in, and we won the first award at FLC. We won the Rookie of the Year. One of my tech transfer specialists, Ryan Davis, who joined the office actually as an intern in 2016. He was one of the first person to bring on. He joined as an intern, and he was initially a support person. He's the one that helped with the FedRAMP certification of the knowledge management system, but he was also an attorney with a biotech background. Well, he worked his way up from an intern, and now he's actually my deputy. And he really was instrumental in doing a lot of the transformation. So that all happened. Then we started to even submit more awards to the FLC. So then Miss Patty Cullum won Rookie of the Year the next year. And then in that same year, actually, I won Professional of the Year. And we also won a few Excellence in Technology Transfer Awards. And we started to win more and more awards. And actually this year, we won an Excellence in Tech Transfer Award. And we also won an Innovation Award for another thing I'm going to talk about. So at that point, everything was going good. We were looking at how we were increasing things. We started to do more licenses. So here's another statistic. In 2016, the office did 1 license. In 2017, we actually wound up doing 0. And we started to increase when TechLead came on board. And last year in FY23, we did, I believe, 12 licenses. And this year we're on track to do, I think, 15. So it was a big increase. And the other thing that happened was the royalty revenue that was brought in 2016, it was only 300,000. And then we brought it up, and now it's in the millions. So in 2021, I believe we hit 7 million. We dipped a little bit. Oh, wait, that was 2022. In 23, we dipped a little bit, like 3 million. And then this year, I think we're already up to 4 million. So the royalties were getting better, and everything was increasing, and things were going really well.
That's a lot of ground covered in a few short years. So if you're keeping track, let's do a quick recap of how Kaplan navigated this jungle. First, he built up his staff, hiring tech transfer specialists and support staff to start making some headway through the bushes and branches. At the same time, he created regions to organize the quickly growing team. Then he zoomed out and took stock of the systems in place. He brought in TechLink to improve technology licensing and marketing, and he streamlined patent prosecution by consolidating to just one law firm. Now, the office had more capacity, so he did outreach and education to get researchers to file more invention disclosures. And he digitized that invention disclosure process to lighten the load for researchers. Within a year or two, the number of invention disclosures had tripled. At this point, things are humming. They're moving through that jungle at a good clip, so Kaplan focuses on making sure his machete wielders and machete sharpeners are getting the recognition they deserve. And the VA starts racking up FLC awards for their tech transfer efforts and staff.
Now, if you remember how I talked about the duly appointed people and how we work with the universities, The other thing we did was when I got to the VA had these cooperative technology administration agreements with the universities on how to deal with joint intellectual property. And those CTAAs were all stilted in the university's favor, meaning that if it was joint intellectual property, the universities controlled it. We didn't have any say. And I said, we can't operate like this. So we put an effort in place to terminate the CTAs and put in place an invention management agreement, which put us on equal footing with the university. So now if there's a piece of joint intellectual property, we negotiate on who's going to take the lead. When we first put those in, the universities did not want us to take the lead. And it was like fighting with them. But over time, they saw all the stuff we were doing, and a lot of them were resource constrained, and they started to let us take the lead more and more. And recently, there's been a few universities who said anything joint, you could take the lead. So we kind of totally switched things up. That was I was pretty surprised about that, but it's been going better and better. And the other thing that's happened was with these invention management agreements, we put a clause in there that allowed us the ability to review and audit the universities to see if they were properly disclosing things and showing us their records of what they were doing with our intellectual property. And I asked them questions, and the terms, because they were also in the CTAAs, these audit provisions, they're kind of standard terms, they had never been exercised. In other words, the VA had never did an audit of anything. And I said, well, we probably need to do that. So then I started figuring out how are we going to do that? We can't do the audit internally. We need an independent entity to come in. So we actually did some work to hire some firm, Price Waterhouse, there was different things, and the price was astronomical. We just couldn't afford it. So just by happenstance, I found out about a VA office at the headquarters level called the Office of Business Oversight. It's an office in the VA that reviews VA offices for compliance and things. I talked to their leader. They were interested. I made an agreement with them, and they started audited. So we did our first audit, I think, in 2019 of the University of Washington, I think it was, and we uncovered a lot. Nothing that the university did purposely, just, mismanagement files. And so we launched an entire program, and now we audit. We do approximately 8 audits a year. And interesting enough, this year we won an innovation award for that program because it turned out no other federal agency had ever audited anything dealing with tech transfer. And we've actually been asked about to educate people on that. So again, we started to turn the corner and lead the way. The other thing aside too is we also have audited some of the licensees, some of the companies that we've licensed technology to, because in the licenses there's audit provisions, and the companies pretty much the audits have gone well with them. So the majority of, we usually do like 8 universities a year, and we might throw in the licensees, but it's mainly centered on the universities. So all that was going on, and the licensing was going okay. But we found that a lot of the VA research was early stage, and there was a lot of risk for companies to license it. So we started to look at, well, what can we do to de-risk, to lower the risk? And we came up with an approach whereby we use these VA facilities that have capabilities to build things like wheelchair parts and different things. And I was able to get some money out of the VA to fund these facilities to that now begin to build prototypes for us to test things out and do things like that. So does that make sense?
It does make sense. And that, I think in your story, the problem of having an understaffed tech transfer office probably resonates with a number of listeners across different agencies. And of course, there's challenges and assets that are specific to the VA. But what I hear in what you've done is that along the way, you built systems and infrastructure to support that fast growth and then to respond to the challenges that came with that acceleration. So are there a few key pieces of advice that you could boil down that might be more broadly applicable to in other agencies wanting to sort of build up their tech transfer capabilities?
Yeah, probably the key thing when I look now at the team and how we've grown is it really is who you bring in. And what I mean by that is when we hire tech transfer people now or support people now, we really look at the person more than their specific qualifications. So we have people with law degrees and PhDs, but we also have people that just have bachelor's degrees. It's a very wide diversity of people, but we really look at how they're going to fit into the team. And what has happened is because of that, the team I have right now is very high performing. I don't really have to give any direction anymore. And a number of things that have happened have been generated internally by the team, not by me. And that has been really the magic because I don't know all the things that they deal with on a daily basis. I don't have their expertise. So like this prototyping program came out of a discussion of my staff that they brought to me when they were working with the university, when they were working at the VA in Pittsburgh. So in Pittsburgh, the VA has this organization called the, it's not an organization, it's a lab, the Human Engineering Research Lab, which is a facility that again can build things like circuit boards, wheelchairs. They can write software. They can do things. Based on my staff's recommendation, I went to their director of this Human Engineering Research Lab and struck a partnership with him. And actually, he's a fascinating guy, but I'll aside from that, to create what we call the Technology Transfer Assistance Program. And I was able to get this money from the Office of Research and Development at the VA to fund this human engineering research lab to develop prototypes. So if we got an invention disclosure, say for a new device to help people put an eye drop in, but the person who came up with the concept and designed it didn't have the capability to build one, we went to this human engineering research lab and they built it. And while they were building it, they worked with the inventor to even make it better. And now we had a prototype and how it worked to show a company. And now that's actually licensed and in the process of being development of product. So that went really well. That effort went really well. And because of that, there was two other sites, one in Cleveland and one in Minneapolis that also had capabilities to build things and other things. We expanded the program, the Technology Transfer Assistance Program, to those two sites. So now we have 3 sites with all these projects going on, building all these prototypes and technologies, testing them, and it's made licensing much better. Not only has it made licensing better, we have developed things that we give directly to veterans. So, for example, somebody came up with a design for a computer mouse for somebody that has a prosthetic hook or their hand isn't right. And there's not a big market for that. So we just make them and give them out. And so we were able to not only help licensing, but also just giving stuff out. Another simple device that was developed, a lot of veterans have breathing problems, so they have oxygen lines in their house. They walk around their house with these long oxygen lines, and the oxygen lines have these valves on them. And the valves, if they're brought by a heat source, can go on fire. So we developed a thermal fuse cover, and now that's available to the oxygen line contractor to put on for safety. So those types of things happen. Because of that, that helped us get FLC awards, and it was kind of a snowball. Then again, some of my people looked at it and said, well, that prototyping effort and the TTAP is fine, but there's other things where that's not going to help. Let's say it's a pharmaceutical or something, and the researcher has developed some stuff, but they need to test it, but they don't have any money for that. We developed another program that went with our kind of our tagline. And I guess I'll go back to that in a second. But now we also have a program where we fund development. So if a VA researcher has developed something and they need a little bit more money for testing, for data, or for anything, we have a whole program where they submit a proposal. It's scored for commercial applicability, and grants are given to do that. And if I think about back to 2016 or 2017, if you would have told me that my office had access to now be funding things and developing things, I would have never thought it. And I believe we're the only government agency where the tech transfer office is doing that type of thing. Maybe there's others, but we don't know of any. So both of those things have really skyrocketed the entire move to expand tech transfer.
Thank you. This has been a wealth of information, and I think probably seeds of ideas that people across the T2 ecosystem can use. Do you have any final words for us?
Yeah, the couple things I missed along the way is the other thing we did when I got to the office is there was no brand for the office. So we, again, pretty soon when I got there, I knew we needed that. We developed our own look for everything we put on, and we actually brainstormed some stuff, and we actually came up with a really neat acronym called BRAVE, which stands for Bringing Research Advancements for Veterans to Everyone. And now that goes on everything we do. And in conjunction with that, we said, well, we need some kind of a look for when we do stuff. So we came up with a color scheme, and we came up with kind of like a shield that we use. And actually, one of my employees' daughters was an artist. She actually sketched something for us, and that's what we use with the Brave. And it's an eagle type look with a V in the middle for veterans. And because of that, we actually she was an elementary school student. I actually went to her school and presented her with like a little award. So that was really good. And we used that. So the branding and all the stuff, and just we're trying to create more and more buzz within the VA that there is tech transfer, and that look what we could do, to advance things. Just in closing, I would say we have a lot of things on the horizon that we're doing. One thing we noted was even with the TTAP to develop prototypes and the Brave funding program, which I just talked about, that's what we call it, the Brave funding program, it still wasn't enough for some things. So at last year's FLC meeting in Cleveland, we met a company that was an integrator, and we got the idea, could we advance technology even more outside of maybe the initial solution it was providing, which is normally medical. And now we have an effort where we've been working on it this entire year, where we've found a venture capitalist who's going to invest in our technology with this integrator to develop technology that we have even more and spin up a new startup. And we're actually about ready to do this really neat technology based on magnetism that I'm hoping is going to be a blockbuster. It was initially developed by a physical therapist to help in that area, but we think with further development, it could possibly be used in fitness, gaming, and it could be a blockbuster. Whether it brings in big money, I'm not really sure. It could, but it might cross into other areas. Like I said, fitness, gaming, we don't even know after further development. So we have that in the works. And if that works, we have other technologies behind that we think would be good for that type of thing. Like somebody developed an ocular device for ophthalmologist. And we think with some work, we might be able to shrink that to help people with glasses, things like that. The last thing I'll say is that sometimes we might not be able to get a venture capitalist interested. So the VA has these nonprofit corporations that could bring in external money. We're looking at a possible mechanism where we go out and get donations to fund that further product development instead of having a VC. If we do that, the VC, we won't have to pay the VC because of course they want return on investment. We have the pathway for that. We just haven't done it yet, but it's kind of in the works. And I'll just wrap up by saying the other thing we're doing is we have a few efforts to use AI to help in some of our areas. And again, they're underway. I'm not going to really talk about them because not that I don't want to share the information. We're just not sure how it's going to go. But we think within the next year, we're going to be using AI for certain things that we're doing, and it's going to really make us way more efficient.
Well, we might have to have you back at that time to tell us about it. Dr. John Kaplan, thank you so much for being here and sharing this with us.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Transfer Files, your insider's look at federal tech transfer. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay connected for more episodes exploring how hundreds of government laboratories and countless industry partners are driving innovations that shape our lives.